This is a new wild target called the Hellborn. It's an intimidating, powerful fire monster that hurls fireballs and charges at you. Think of it like an immolator on steroids. I got a chance to get a sneak peek of this monster during a preview, and I want to share with you some of the things I learned about how to find it, how to fight it, how to survive against it, and then finally how its rewards are different than the classic RotJaw rewards. Now it's important to note that RotJaw actually isn't going to be appearing in the Colorado map at all, so the only wild target available for this is going to be the Hellborn. But Hellborn differs from RotJaw in quite a few ways. First off is its natural territory. You could only find RotJaw in the different rivers throughout the other maps. Obviously, because it's a fire monster, that's not going to work for the Hellborn much. So, you're actually going to find him on the ground running around a handful of different areas on the map. The first time I found him, I was just running through a compound and I turned a corner and all of a sudden he was there launching fireballs at me. Eventually though, after a few more games, I did figure out how to actually find him by design. Originally, I thought it might have to do with the buildings and compounds on fire, because I noticed that the times I did run into him, those compounds were on fire. But I think that was just a coincidence, and the simple fact that there's a lot of stuff burning on this map. The real way you're going to find him is you're going to use your dark sight, and while in your dark sight, you're going to hear a growl from the direction that he's coming from. And that'll give you the indication of which way to head. The good news about this is you always know the direction he's coming from. You don't need to run around and look for the stumps like with RotJaw. But the downside of this is he's a little harder to triangulate. Either way, once you do get close to him, he will glow blue like the other bosses do. But if you keep an eye out, you can also see him from a distance. And this can be used with longer range weapons to even hit him and begin damaging him before you get close to him. So now that we talked about how to find him, let's talk about how to fight him. First off, I think it's really cool that we finally have a boss where the de facto best way to kill him isn't just running up and meleeing him. That's because of his collection of different fire-based attacks. So if you find yourself too close to him, you're going to really struggle to avoid those attacks and probably be burning off a lot of chunks. His fire damage is extreme and lethal if you don't stay on your toes and avoid it. Here's a first snapshot of my first encounter where I wasn't ready for it and he burned almost the entirety of my character's health. So if you're not taking appropriate evasive actions, he can very, very quickly not just damage you, but burn all of your health away. So let's talk about those attacks you need to avoid. First off, his most common attack is he's going to hurl 3 fireballs at you in quick succession. These are lethal and can burn the majority of a large bar off with each one that hits you. The good news is that they're pretty easy to dodge. If you hear him throwing these, you can strafe right and left, and the fireballs are going to miss you. In addition, if you can find a small piece of cover, it's easy to crouch behind that, as he'll throw all 3 in quick succession, and he won't bother to wait whether or not he can actually see you. Now, the next attack seems to occur when either you get too close to him or you're taking too long to engage him. He will rush you, and he'll do an explosion. It's similar to an explosion an immolator would let out, although it's not happening when you shoot him. He's just using it as an attack. The particularly dangerous part about this is that if he uses this attack and burns you, he's going to be following it up with the 3 fireballs. So even though you're on fire and close to him, you need to make sure to move out of the way quickly so you don't get burned by the fireballs. Really, with any of his stuff, if you get tagged and you start taking time to remove the fire, you put yourself in risk at getting hit more. The good news is that these maps have a lot of cover for you to move around. So just make sure you get to cover before you start bandaging it. That'll protect you from any follow-up fireballs. Then the last attack, he seems to use if you're just hiding behind cover too much. He'll stand still for a second and then he'll let out a burst of fireballs that fly out in several different directions. These never seem to make contact with me, so I'm not sure I was just standing in the right spot, or if they're more of an element of spectacle than an actual attack. One thing to note is that he didn't seem to have a rage phase. For example, when you get RotJaw halfway down, She stops and screams and throws out the electric goo. When I got him down to half health, he didn't seem to do anything special. In general, he's a very aggressive boss, so if you're in his area and he knows you're there, he's going to be charging you down and shooting stuff at you. But at no point did I see any special phase or attack that seemed to be related to how much damage I did to him. Alright, so we talked about his attacks against you. Now, how do you fight him? The good news is that you can just take him down with weapons pretty darn easy. Yes, you're going to be making noise, but it's already going to be a noisy fight with his yelling and how much he moves. So even though he seems like a big immolator, it's good to know that the one thing that he doesn't do like an immolator is he doesn't explode. And you can shoot him with any sort of round and he's not going to have a burst of fire. But in reality, you don't want to be close to him anyways, but just know that it is safe to shoot him. While regular gunfire is a good strategy, what are some other things that could be useful? This seems like a boss that you don't actually want to be meleeing. So since there isn't really a safe way to melee this boss down, if you're planning on taking on the Hellborn, you're probably going to want some specialized gear to do that. Some things that might help is silencers would be particularly effective. One thing that I find interesting is you can actually use choke bombs offensively on him. Here's a spot where I dropped a choke beetle on him and watch how quickly it eats away at his health. So this brings an extra reason to not only bring choke bombs, but maybe consider bringing choke bolts as a secondary on your hand crossbow. Just remember, on the hand crossbow, if you bring choke bolts and poison, choke clouds will remove poison, so you probably don't want to use those both. Then, to no surprise, if you hit him with a firebomb or something, it does nothing to it. He just walks through it. The one thing I didn't get to test is explosives, but I would assume that explosives are going to affect him like they would any other boss. Now, what's in it for you? Once you defeat him, what do you get? Well, good news, they're changing how this wild target works compared to RotJaw. First of all, the restoration effect happens as soon as you hit the final blow on him, meaning you don't need to run up and activate a banish. On top of that, there is no banish period. As soon as he goes down, the restoration hits, a single bounty lands on the ground, and a burn trait appears by his body. But this means we have a reliable and predictable, if somewhat occasional, way to get burn traits. Simply find the Hellborn and take him out. I really like this change. Getting the instant rewards at the end of the wild target is going to make it feel a lot better to not have to wait for that banish period in an open and vulnerable way. You can quickly get the kill, grab the goodies, and get out of that. On top of that, it's another opportunity for counterplay. If you're hiding and observing another team try and take out the Hellborn, if you're the one that makes the final shot, your team is going to get the restoration bonus. And so this puts a lot more pressure on who actually gets the final hit of the boss. I think these changes are going to make wild targets a lot less tedious and more engaging for everyone. And I should also let you know that there's a sale in the Crytek store until August 20th. If you use the partner code HUNTLAB, you'll get 20% off any of the purchases you make until then.